Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into the really multifaceted world of psychedelics.
Mhm.
You've sent us a fascinating array of sources, actually. Really sets the stage for a journey through time, science, and, well, culture.
It's quite a mix.
Yeah. We'll be exploring the book, The Psychedelic Renaissance. There's a compelling Vox article on China's unique psychedelic scene.
That one's really interesting.
Information from the Psychedelic Info line, and also an insightful piece from Euless Clinics called The Psychedelic Renaissance, a journey through time and healing.
Okay.
So our mission really is to connect the dots between these and, uncover the key insights into this, well, rapidly evolving field.
It's a fantastic collection.
Yeah.
And it immediately highlights that we're not just dealing with one single thing here, are we?
No, not at all.
You've got ancient practices, cutting-edge research, and these wildly different cultural takes all kind of converging.
Right.
It makes you wonder what the underlying human relationship with these substances really is.
Absolutely. And, given that some might see psychedelics as fairly new, it feels crucial to start where many of your sources begin the ancient roots.
Definitely.
The U.S. Clinics article and the Psychedelic Renaissance book description, they both really stress how long these substances have been part of the human story.
That's right. The Euless Clinics piece, it points out that for millennia, literally across continents,
Yeah.
indigenous communities have woven psychedelics into spiritual ceremonies, celebrations, healing rituals.
Right, like ayahuasca.
Exactly. Think ayahuasca in the Amazon
Mhm.
or the ritual use of psilocybin mushrooms in Mesoamerica.
Mhm.
And we have archaeological findings now, like traces of psychoactive compounds on old artifacts
Wow.
that really solidify this deep history. It suggests this long-standing human interest in, altered states for all sorts of reasons.
It certainly reframes the whole conversation, doesn't it? It's not some fleeting trend, but something like deeply embedded. But then, as both the Euless Clinics article and the Psychedelic Renaissance mention, the story takes a pretty sharp turn mid-20th century.
Yeah.
This initial burst of scientific curiosity, then? Well, then Prohibition.
Yeah, what's fascinating there is you have the mid-20th century, the isolation, the synthesis of compounds like LSD, psilocybin.
Mm-hmm.
There was real scientific exploration into their potential therapeutic uses. Some early studies looked promising.
Whoop.
But then the social or political upheavals of the 60s, the counterculture link, and then the whole war on drugs.
Right.
It led to widespread legal bans, tons of stigma. And that effectively it slammed the brakes on a lot of that promising research for decades.
It's like a whole avenue of inquiry just got sort of closed off abruptly.
Pretty much.
But as the title of one of our key sources suggests, we're now in a psychedelic renaissance. Both the book and the Euless Clinics article highlight this renewed interest, which seems to have really picked up steam around, 2006?
Yeah, around then.
What's driving this resurgence, do you think?
Well, there are several things going on. The Euless Clinics article really emphasizes a revitalized clinical interest, especially in the UK. Places like Imperial College London.
Okay.
They highlight research suggesting psychedelics might be effective for treating conditions like depression, anxiety, PTSD.
Which are huge issues.
Huge. And the Psychedelic Renaissance book description also points to this therapeutic potential as a major driver. It seems like, as traditional treatments maybe hit their limits for some people,
Right.
researchers are looking for new approaches. And psychedelics are just re-emerging as this, compelling area to study again.
Yeah.
Perhaps that focus on healing is something that particularly resonates with you, given the sources you shared.
It definitely sparks my curiosity, yeah. And this resurgence, it isn't just happening in the clinic, is it?
No.
The book description mentions all sorts of applications, specialized retreats, personal growth journeys, but this is where that Vox article on China throws in a really unexpected angle.
Oh, absolutely. This piece is remarkable because it just shows so clearly how profoundly cultural contexts can shape everything, the understanding, the reasons for using psychedelics.
Yeah, so?
Well, the anthropologist Alex Guerin's work in China, it reveals this psychedelic subculture where the goals are often really different from that dominant Western narrative about therapy.
Different how?
Instead of focusing primarily on, say, healing trauma or spiritual exploration, the scene Guerin observed in China often mirrors the ambition, the productivity focus of, Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley, that's quite a comparison.
It is. The article mentions people like Ting Ting, a tech manager, and Wayne, a fast food exec,
Okay.
using ayahuasca, specifically hoping to boost their careers, achieve more success professionally.
Wow. Yeah, that's a very different set of goals from what you usually hear about in the West, isn't it?
Completely.
Yeah.
And it just underscores this powerful influence of culture on even subjective experience.
Yeah.
Take Zhang's DMT trip, described in the article. Pink Chinese Goddesses, a cosmic live stream showing his moral flaws to, like, floating eyes and internet users.
Whoa.
That imagery directly pulls from Chinese culture, the surveillance state, the live streaming subculture.
You can really see the connection.
Right. It powerfully shows how our cultural backgrounds can deeply structure even these really internal, seemingly universal experiences. An anthropologist, Anthony Wallace, actually suggested culture-controlled trials way back in 1959 to try and figure this stuff out.
It really makes you pause and think how much of what we assume is a core psychedelic experience is actually filtered through our own cultural lens.
Exactly.
And the Vox article also talks about how Guerin's research sort of challenges that Western idea that psychedelics are maybe a return to spirituality that we lost through industrialization.
The disenchantment thesis.
Right. But in China, it seems business and psychedelics are kind of intertwined,
Yeah.
leading to this idea of psychedelic capitalism.
That's a huge insight. It shows these substances can be integrated into really different societal frameworks. And interestingly, it echoes some historical uses in indigenous Amazonian cultures, where psychedelics were sometimes used for more secular gains, too.
Huh. So it's not entirely unprecedented.
Not entirely. And it's interesting how even people facilitating experiences in China, like Luke, the European retreat leader in the article,
Yeah.
he adapts his language. He talks more about anxiety, depression, finding purpose, things that resonate with a more secular audience there, rather than just spiritual stuff.
So tailoring the message to the culture.
Exactly. It shows how interpretation and use get shaped by specific cultural needs and values.
Okay, so with all this growing interest globally, these really diverse applications, the need for reliable information for ways to minimize risks, that becomes super important, right?
Absolutely crucial.
Which brings us to the psychedelic info line. Seems like a really vital resource.
It does. The materials you shared about them really emphasize their commitment to offering free, confidential support. And importantly, it's grounded in scientific research.
Right.
Their main goal seems to be harm reduction, helping people make informed choices, improving outcomes if they do decide to use these substances or are considering it.
And it's good they offer different ways to connect, call, chat, schedule appointments, and it's actual people, not bots.
Yeah, that human element is key.
The kinds of questions they handle, interactions with meds, potential benefits for anxiety or depression, what to do if things get difficult during an experience, it shows the range they cover.
It does, and it's also really important to clock their disclaimers.
Good point.
They're very clear. This is a medical advice. People have to follow their local laws. It's for adults 21 and over.
Standard but necessary stuff.
Absolutely. And they correctly point out they can't provide crisis support during an active experience. They direct people to resources like the Fireside Project for that immediate help, which is, a very responsible approach.
Definitely. Essential in such a fast-moving area.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's try and pull these different threads together. Looking back at your sources, a few key things really stand out, don't they?
Yeah, I think so.
First, psychedelic use isn't new. It has this incredibly long, significant history across loads of cultures.
Right, not some modern invention.
Second, after that period where research was basically shut down, we're definitely seeing a major resurgence now. Scientific research, therapeutic applications, especially around mental health.
A real renaissance, as the sources call it.
Third, and this was maybe the most striking part for me, culture plays this huge role. It shapes the experience itself, the reasons for use. The China example just vividly illustrates that.
It's a powerful reminder that context is everything.
And finally, with all this growing interest, you absolutely need accessible, evidence-based info and harm reduction. Resources like the Psychedelic Info Line become critical.
Couldn't agree more. Education and safety have to keep pace with the interest.
Exactly. So, thinking bigger picture now, considering this deep history, the therapeutic promise we're seeing again, and just how powerfully culture shapes it all, what might the future actually look like?
That's the big question, isn't it?
As these substances become maybe more integrated into different societies, what happens? Will we see more blending of the spiritual and the secular?
Or maybe more divergence depending on the culture.
Yeah, maybe. And how do we ensure, equitable access, responsible integration,
Yeah.
especially in a world with such varied cultural viewpoints on these things?
These are definitely the crucial questions we need to grapple with as this psychedelic renaissance keeps
Mhm.
unfolding. Lots for you, the listener, to think about.
For sure. Hopefully, this deep dive into the sources has given you some valuable perspectives to consider.